Hello, Drunkduckers! Oh my god, this is Ozone Ocean, and with me are Tunt and Beans. Hello!
Hello.
Okay, so this week we're talking about anime!
Hooray.
Yay, yes, we're talking about this is the Drunkduck Quackcast, of course. Quackcast number 735. I'm Ozone Ocean, as I said, with me is Tunt and Beans. And yeah, we're talking about anime this week. That's our subject. Which, yeah, that's a pretty good subject. We had other subjects in mind, but they depressed us too much, so anime is our subject. Yay. So we're going to talk about all aspects of that. But before we get into that, got to bring up the featured comic. This week I featured a comic called Water Lily High, so I will be telling you about Water Lily High. Hello, I am Ozone Ocean, and my feature for this week was Water Lily High. Water Lily, California, is home to some very strange people, namely a whole bunch of teens with supernatural abilities, and some that might technically not be considered as actually being alive. They get into all the normal scrapes and japes teens normally do, plus some extra, because of their weird supernatural statuses. This is a full-color comic strip comedy comic with an art style reminiscent of the Total Drama series, if you remember that. So if you like to look at fun art and enjoy some comedy, this is the place to come. Water Lily High. It seems one of my problems with the comic was that some of the joke setups seem like really funny. Kind of starts to like a bit. Like there's going to be a few pages devoted to this particular thing, and it's like a lead up, and then it's a follow through, and then you get a punchline after the fifth page, something like that. And that doesn't happen. It actually does happen. Like once or twice, but not as much as you'd think. You'd think it's going to happen every single time. But when I got used to that, see, this is a me thing, not a thing with a comic. When I got used to that a lot of the comics were like, just one page, and that was the joke. Then that was fine. You just got to get used to that. And it's it's quite a funny little comic. I like the Total Drama kind of style of it. I think that's really cool. And it's really fun. I like the art style, and it's funny enough, and it's a cool comic, especially how you don't have to get involved in a huge big long storyline either. So it's like a one-off sort of thing. So it's good to have a comic like that. So have a look at Water Lily High. It's by WLH Comics. It's rated T for teen. That was Water Lily High. Okay, so now Gumballs has got a featured theme music for us. He was able to record one. And, so what's this one? It's a melancholy, surreal piece. It's the theme to a comic called Landscapes and Stick Figures. Melancholy and surreal. It's like mechanized people, all made of crystal glass, dancing in an intricate series of interweaving and interlocking moves. It's quite beautiful. So take it away, Gumwallace, with your theme to Landscapes and Stick Figures. Gumwallace with his theme to landscapes and stick figures. Enjoy that, and then go and check out the comic and see if you enjoy that too. Okay, so anime. Look, anime is what is it? Like definitions and stuff like that. So anime is just basically cartoons that come from Japan. Originally, that's what it is. Nothing more. It's just cartoons like cartoons from anywhere else. America, Australia, Russia, England, whatever. France. But they just happen to be cartoons that came from Japan. And we call them anime because that's what Japanese call them. Anime, which is, of course, comes from an English word. And we act as if they're a separate thing. But they're not really. They're just cartoons. But we can see them as a separate thing because they're just coming from Japan, and they do follow, like, there is a particular likeness from a lot of the animations from Japan. Not all anime looks the same, but most of it does have very, very strong similarities. With the big eyes, the small noses, the tiny mouths, that kind of thing. People with coloured hair and different ways of reacting to things like that. And all this, something son, all this kind of stuff. So it does have a kind of universal.
A lot of camera movements instead of character movements. Although there's some beautiful action animation in anime, some anime. A lot of times it's just the camera moving around, the character just flickering eye highlights or flowing hair and everything else is slow. And it can be very effective, actually.
Yeah, and sometimes when there is action, it is a character static in an action pose, but the background has very animated action lines.
Yeah.
And we all know this is, of course, because the style is quite realistic not realistic, but it is much more realistic than the typical style of, say, American animation and French and all that, which is more stylized.
Yeah.
But
cell shading, which is a distinctive aspect of anime, right?
Which, of course, made it more complicated to draw and more expensive. And the trade-off is, of course, what we're talking about here, the cheapness of, scenes. So you animate, you'd have really easy movement in the background, so you have a static, like a painted scene for the background, but you have it so large that you can move it sideways and pan in the scene, so it looks like you've got this clever movement, but it's really kind of cheaply done, and that makes up for the fact that you've got expensively drawn things which look more realistic. So yeah, it's a good trade-off, and it works really well. So that's basically why the whole thing exists. Just cost benefit,
Yeah.
Versus, we used to have the typical animation in Western, like something like Hanna-Barbera stuff, just super stylized and, all that McGilly Gorilla kind of bullshit, and Yogi Bear, all that kind of stuff. Which is very, very stylized. And then you've got the future, what was it after that? That was really Looney Tunes as well, very stylized, which is quite expensive but quite stylized. And then you've got the whole what was his name, Ren and Stimpy stuff, which is a kind of retro calling back to the Hanna-Barbera and previous stuff with the very stylized characters, and they're very they're very artificial, they're not very real sort of thing. They're very abstracted versus the Japanese stuff, which is way less abstracted. It's only stylized in a very regular way with the big eyes and the big heads and little tiny mouths.
Yeah.
So we're going for the definitions here. That's just, it's not that important. It just sort of gives people an idea of what we're talking about. And of course, other countries have since copied that anime style, Chance, you were talking about China has copied it, Korea, and that was mainly because, not just because they like the style, but that was because Chinese and Koreans had the big animation studios, and they were doing all the cheap stuff and all the interstitial joining animations between particular scenes, all the kind of grunt work. So you had that in massive studios in Korea doing it, Then they got too expensive, and then it moved on to
They
China.
would do it for American animation too, for shows like even the Simpsons and everything. Like all this stuff was sent. Maybe I think it's probably still is. I don't know. Done in
It
Korea.
still is. Yep. But yeah, so that's why they started doing China and Korea. They started doing the Japanese style because people had so much practice at it. So it wasn't just because they liked it or they happened to be Asian. It was just because that's what they worked on. So yeah, now they're doing it. And sorry, I was going to say, like, we've also got stuff like American stuff that is like that. Avatar. And a whole bunch of other things that are in that style. So yeah, sorry, Tans.
No, I was going to say exactly that. So.
Oh, right. Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of stuff here, not just Avatar, but there's other things, yeah. So it moves along. But anyway, anime, which is what do we like in it? Well, we mentioned a thing before in our Patreon video, which we just did when we were talking about it, that one of the massive strengths of anime isn't the style, isn't the look, it's the fact that there is such a massive diversity of different types of stories and genres that they can do. Because this is a huge, established industry, much bigger than anywhere else in the world. Because, say, American animation or French animation, you've either got, it's geared to either little tiny kids or it's geared to, 20-somethings and above. And it's only one of those two things. And the styles of the kind of stuff that are delivered to kids is very kind of limited. It's not very adventurous. And the styles of stuff delivered to adults is, again, it's not very, there's not a huge diversity. Most American, or most Western adult animation is stuff with a lot of sex and a lot of violence. And whatever it's about, it's always got that in it. It can be fun, like Archer or something like that, or whatever, but there's always going to be a massive amount of violence in there. It shits me a lot of the time, the way it's so amoral and so violent, and that's what they think animation's about.
I would even venture to say that they go whole hog on the violence often just to prove that they are not for kids. So they really ramp up the violence or the sex, but usually the violence. So there's that.
It is, even something like a Craptopia, which is a really fun thing about Greek gods and stuff like that. So you've got this it's English, it's British, I should say, not English. And you've got these people who are founding some sort of empire and dealing with gods. There's a massive amount of violence in there. It's like, what? There's always just massive violence and stuff. It's just inserted in there. It could be about anything, and there's always that. Like Tan said, just to prove it's adult. But the massive diversity in Japanese animation and Japanese the influenced stuff that's influenced by Japanese animation means they don't have to prove themselves. They can be far more interesting and just tackle just weird aspects of something. So one of the latest fad genres was the isekai fad. So you have people going to another land for some reason, they magically transported to a fantasy land, which has the same kind of rules as a role-playing game. There was so much of that, and it started out with, really interesting stories about people trapped in video games and all that, and then it sort of expanded onto, people being transported to different lands and suddenly having all the upgraded superpowers and just, being almost gods and getting it on with people or whatever. And then it, people sort of got tired of that. So they went further and they were thinking, okay, so how can we make this even more interesting? Okay, so we'll have a person gets transported to a fantasy land, but they're a vending machine. The person is actually a vending machine, which was hilarious. Or they're a handyman, or they're someone who just their only superpower is they can do online shopping. And so, like, those are weird kind of variations of it, but those were intended for adults, and yet there's no sex in them. The violence is pretty stylized and not more violence than any other violence, and it works just because the topic makes it more interesting. It's not a topic that would be interesting to kids at all, because it's a little bit more like advanced and weird. But to adults it is, because we like to think, in circles, and we like to think around stuff. So, yeah, in terms of adult animation, Japanese animation is way better than Western stuff. Not because Japanese people are cleverer or anything like that, which is silly. No one's more clever than anyone else. It's just because the industry is far more mature and settled.
I would say, even I remember as a kid, we had the blessing of Saturday morning cartoons being anything the state TV could get its hands on that was animated. They didn't really care as long as it was, cartoons.
Yes.
So it could be anything animated from any country at any place, doesn't matter. So we had, a ton of American cartoons, but we also had some very weird Russian cartoons, and also some Asian cartoons, because back then they were just Asian cartoons over here. They were not anime. And I remember that I really liked them, because although they were definitely addressed to kids, they had, they weren't afraid to be very serious, although it was for kids. I remember, for example, there was this one anime called Romeo and Juliet, and it was about this princess that cross-dresses as a guy and joins the army in a way, I guess. Not exactly Mulan, because they were not going to war, but she was basically a very gifted strategist. So in order to become a general, she had to pretend to be a man. And the other guy she was the Juliet, and the Romeo was this other dude that was forced to be in the army, whereas he didn't want to be in the army, but he was very good at the sword, but hated it, very conflicted guy. And the entire thing was a diatribe on politics, diplomacy, and yourself. And it was addressed to I'm expecting like school-age kids, because it was drawn in a way that was for kids. But it made you think of like, oh my God, the politics is serious, and I should be considering, the other person, all of that. And I remember sitting there as a little girl, sort of gawking at them. And then you also have, like, if they get injured, they show blood, although it's not gory, but they show blood. And I was like, oh, they went there. Yeah. I love them, that sort of thing. Anyway, I really liked it as a kid, and I think that they are more responsible with how I write, the style I write usually, than a lot of European stuff. So
that's interesting. More responsible. I think you might be right there, actually.
The drama, all the drama I took from there. So
I think you might be right there, yeah, because not all the time, but they can be. They can approach stuff in a more sophisticated, clever kind of way. That's true. What about you, Bones? What's your kind of take on this?
Well, I found it to be like the little bit I saw when I was a kid. Really, what captured me were the visuals. Like I said on Patreon, like it really seemed to hit me on a different level than most of the cartoons I was watching in Canada as a kid. A lot of American cartoons, some European. The stuff was like just kind of made you perk up when you saw it because I think a lot of, I mean, it must have been the character design, it must have been the animation style, which, like I said on Patreon, was like it's like more like the camera moving around, a lot of still shots of characters, or mostly still. The stylized looking characters, the sort of extra attention to the eyes and stuff like that, and most of all, maybe the cell shading. I wouldn't have known that at the time, but it was like, why does this look so good? I used to watch Thundercats sometimes, and it's not anime, but like the opening credits, I loved. I was like, this show is amazing, and then I would be way less interested in the actual show. The opening is more fully animated, but it also is cell shaded, so it looks really.
Yeah, and I also think that it was done, and I mean, don't quote me on that, but I think it was done in a studio or from a team that is separate from the team that made the actual episodes. I think so. That's why, like, they invested a lot on the opening.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, the opening to sort of sell the show, so to speak, maybe. Yeah. But what did I see? I would have seen Battle of the Planets, which is Gotcha Man, an anime, and I have no memory of any of the stories. I now have the full set. I haven't really started watching it yet. But Battle of the Planets. I envy you. Oh yeah, man, you gotta get yourself one, sir. But I got the Gotcha Man one. It's the Japanese version. Battle of the Planets was a re-edited, redone, and new animated pieces added, and obviously English voices redubbing everything. A kind of a cut-up version of Gotcha Man. So I watched some of that, loved it, loved the way it looked, loved the chaoticness of it. Like, it kind of felt more dangerous. I watched Project A-Code years later. Oh yeah, I really liked that. It just felt so different than anything else I was watching.
Project A-Code is a great, massive parody of millions of different, many different animes.
I gotta try and watch it again. I gotta find it and check it out. It's been so long. I just saw little bits of it in early high school, I guess it was.
Yeah, it's once you've seen it or again, maybe you could sort of go. You can appreciate it more because it's you could recognize more of the animes that it's making fun of, and the genres and the styles. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting one. It's a bit Aeroplane, Meet the Spartans in a way.
Really? Okay.
Wow.
just because of the level of parody involved in there, but it's still good in its own way, even though it's really silly. But yeah.
And they did have it geared for different age groups. Like we're getting those like I think they have genres for little kids and older kids, teen boys, teen girls, young adult men, young adult women, and then older people. They have all these genres in manga, which obviously anime comes from, manga series. And that's very interesting. There's stuff that didn't appeal. They used to rerun Astro Boy every day. And that wasn't really for me. I was probably too old. Yeah.
Yeah. There was something like a thing of dissonance for me. Speaking of, since you mentioned Astro Boy, if I'm not mistaken, I probably am going to make a huge mistake and embarrass myself from the chat about now.
I don't remember. I just remember the vague, like the look of him and just the vague kind of. He was just playing in the background.
Oh, really? I liked Astro Boy when I was a kid. I don't know. There's been a few different iterations of Astro Boy. Many different iterations. So,
it is by Tezuka, and that's why I remembered it. Because his style, I low-key hate. I really don't like the way he...
Really? He's one of the fathers of the anime style.
He's, and I have huge, like, mad respect for him because he also has created the Blackjack. That is one of the animes I really like.
Yeah.
Like, I super really like. But man, I really didn't like the way he drew people.
It's very babyish kind of
Oh
look to
my
them.
God. Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Which was, of course, originally influenced by Disney and the style that they were doing.
Right. Yeah.
And he draws like he has this very, very like emo guy that is the surgeon and stuff, and he's surrounded, and he sticks out like a sore thumb, not completely, but if you see all the other people drawn in the cast, like they are typical Tezuka balloon head, really round people.
Yeah.
And then you have Blackjack in the middle, being like the most angular character he has ever drawn, which does not say much because he still is round, but he's more like a serious drawing. I don't know if you can say that. And the stories told through these characters are quite serious because it is all about ethics, and it is like a tacit introduction to ethics and what it means to be ethical and how to make ethical decisions. It is really not a medical show because the medicine doesn't make sense in there, even though Tezuka was a doctor and all of that. But what does make sense and what he was pretty sure he was interested in was the ethics of the matter. What makes you an ethical doctor? What makes you an ethical person in the first place? How do you make certain calls when no solution is correct? All of that, or no solution is like neat and ties everything up, in nice little bows. So I loved that, and I still do. And I had to sort of teach myself not to pay attention to his drawing. So yeah, I was overjoyed when the OVAs came out that were drawn in a very, very, very angular anime style. Like, I watched the hell out of those, and the Blackjack 21 as well. The series is, I think, the best Blackjack in a nutshell, because originally in the manga were like little stories that he compiled and stuff. But whoever wrote the Blackjack 21, if you ever get to see it, because it's very hard to find now as a series, it is all of the stories combined in one cohesive super adventure that includes mysteries about his past, stuff that he has to go through to resolve the mystery and all that, and it ties all the stories, the important stories, really well together. And the style is really well drawn without betraying Tezuka's style. It's still not balloon people, but you can recognize that it is Tezuka's creation. And soundtrack is top notch, highly recommended. Anyway, so
that's interesting. So Tezuka's one of the fathers of the style, in the animation style, which is of course based on the manga style that people draw, because the manga obviously came first, but then anime sort of became more of its own thing. But it's always inspired by whatever is popular in manga style as well. That always sort of feeds into it. But early anime, you have these Tezuka's balloon head people. That was a very, very popular thing. Of course, I loved Kimba, the White Lion. That was one of my favorites back in the day. And then you have other people's styles, like, say, what was really popular. We have Robotech, which was Macross. Yeah, Macross. Battle of the
Well, I saw
Planets.
some Battle of the Planets. Lupin is one I forgot to mention.
Lupin.
That made a huge impression on me.
But the styles of all these different things, and Captain Harlock, all that kind of stuff. They,
oh my God, yes.
They were very particular styles. So now anime is a lot more generic. You don't really have that diversity of style like you had back in the 70s and the 80s. Maybe the 60s or whatever when it begins. I don't know if I've ever seen any much 60s anime to really make a comment. I've seen like...
I haven't seen much either. I haven't seen any, I think.
So. Oh, you probably would have. But yeah, mainly 70s and 80s is what I started with. But there's a massive diversity of style then, which it's a bit missed now. I mean, even into the 90s, there was still a bit of a diversity of style. And weirdly, we were saying Western animation, when it comes to adult animation, it's always like extreme violence is one of the hallmarks of basically almost all adult animation from the West. Violence and sex. Sometimes there's like you get The Simpsons or Futurama or Disenchanted. All those things are by the same people, and there's a bit less violence in those things, but there still is like an overtone of that, especially in Futurama and Disenfranchised or whatever, Disenchanted. But yeah, in anime, in adult anime, there's a lot more variation. But back in the 90s anime was massively violent and sexual. Like that was a huge, big indication. When you go back to looking at a 1990s anime, it's brutal. Even the stuff meant for kids, like I think Sailor Moon was re-edited to be a lot less violent and sexy than it used to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you look at like Akira being a massive popular thing, and Ghost in the Shell, those things are massively popular, but they were quite violent, and those ones were not anywhere near the most violent anime. Something like 80 Police, Bubblegum Crisis, massively popular. Wicked City, of course, what was Orotsukudoji, Legend of the Overfiend. It's just horribly vicious, disgusting.
Right.
Yeah, like Angel Cop. Oh my God, so freaking violent. These days, you still have some viciously violent anime, but that's not what you typically get with anime. You don't look at anime and think, yep, this is going to be massively violent. Some things are, but they're like the exception. Most anime is massively varied. It's massively varied. Some things are really kiddie, some things are middle, some things are this and that. But yeah, back in the 90s.
I would also say that a lot of anime is violent, but the violence is sanitized to certain degrees, varying degrees. Like I'm thinking, for example, I want to say early 90s, but certainly in the 90s. The Rurouni Kenshin anime that was, I think it was in the mid-90s, somewhere there, super violent, because the whole idea is, violence, and an ex-murderer sort of guy like that, not exactly murder, but the guy that has bloodlust in the battlefield and kills everybody inside, that
He's
sort
a
of
soldier.
Guy. Super soldier, I would say, chooses a life of peace and non-killing,
Pacifism.
while also not exactly, because he's not a pacifist, and there is even a whole episode where he explains that he is not a pacifist actually, but he's a non-killer now. The point is that he does not want to kill, so he has this reverse bladed sword that supposedly doesn't kill people, even though it's basically a gigantic crowbar that he hits people over the head with. But the idea is that it has a lot of violence. There is also, bloody things getting bloodied a lot, but it is not gory. Like, you don't see mutilations, let's say, or guts flying all around and stuff like that. You do see people getting beat up and injuries and stuff like that, but it is, I would say, sanitized even from the manga, because in the manga it is a lot more violent than it is in the anime, and the anime is violent enough. So I would say that there are degrees of the gore. Like, the gore is the slider, not the violence per se necessarily. It is how much you see. Like, for example, in Blue Eye Samurai, when she bursts in to fight like 10 disciples of another martial school, there is a level of gore that you wouldn't expect to see in something like Kenshin, that is for kids and stuff, where you have teeth flying out of someone's mouth and stuff like that. So that's what I mean. But the violence is the same. It's again one person beating several other people up really, really efficiently. But in one you see flying teeth, and in another you just see them groaning and being sort of bent out of shape a little bit. So
yeah, which is like American movies or whatever. The violence can always be there, but it's more implied or more graphic, depending on what it is. Yeah, like today, you'll have gore and violence in anime that is extreme. And I'd still say, like, back in the 90s, it was more extreme because that was, like, everything was, super violent back then. Now, some things are super violent and they show the gore. But it's not as universal anymore. But these days when gore is shown, it tends to be like the blood is shown as being slightly black or really dark, so it's not as effective as bright red blood. And like I remember in, say, something like Angel Cop or whatever, you see bodies like ripped slowly apart with blood vessels and skin and like heads exploded and like that was so common back then. It was just disgusting. Whereas these days you will still get like extreme violence, but it's not so lovingly rendered, because of course back then everything was hand drawn, like everything. These days, just because of computers have made things a bit cheaper, you can cheap out and you don't have to hand draw every single little detail, which makes it a bit less visceral, so to speak. Pardon the pun. It's a good pun. It's not even a pun, it's just literal. Sorry, Baines.
You guys remember, I don't know if this is an alternate title. It's called Outlanders. At least the DVD I found was called Outlanders. It's about like an alien warrior princess who comes to Earth, and this human guy joins her, and there's some kind of big space battle. It's another one. It's been a long time. But does this sound familiar to either of you?
The title sort of sounds, but there's so many things about alien princess coming to Earth and joining a man.
And things get retitled as well. Okay, she had horns anyway, and was her hair green?
Oh, okay, that rings a bell a little bit. The horns.
Yeah, that was an early one I saw. I didn't know what anime was, but like in the middle of, I saw a little bit of Lupin and a little bit of Project A-ko, and of course Battle of the Planets and stuff like that. Then saw this one, and there's just an opening sequence of death, like brutal death committed by the female heroine. She's like killing all these guys. It's like very unusual compared to anything else I would have seen at the time.
Wow.
I was just curious if you guys remembered that one.
I mean, I remember some episodes of Battle of the Planets, or was it G-Force was another name for it, that was done in the 70s or I think it was done in the late 70s, actually.
I think so. I don't know I think there were maybe two different edits, Battle of the Planets and G-Force. I don't know when. Yeah.
But it was shockingly realistic in style compared to the Western stuff that was out at the time, where the most realistic stuff was, say, He-Man or I don't know, whatever else. But yeah, it was way more realistic than that. And I loved everyone having 1970s fashions, people wearing flares and having those hairstyles and stuff like that. Was really cool. But it could be quite violent. I remember as a kid, the level of violence in there was just really big. They didn't show gore, I don't think, but
that was a sanitized version. I don't know if the full Gatchaman has much gore either. I'm not sure, but I think Battle of the Planets was quite edited down for Western kids, and even then, it felt different.
Because the idea, like in the West, as we've discussed, is that animation is something kids like, and they could market it to kids, of course, as well as just having that preconceived prejudice. There's a market. Kids love moving 2D images, so that's why they sort of have had that prejudice. But of course, these things weren't intended for kids.
Right.
I remember one of the times I was sick and allowed to not go to school. My grandma, who was notorious for bringing anything that was animated, thinking it was for kids. I have a couple of stories from those kinds of escapades. But she brought me to watch from the, she rented the video cassette back in the day, and it was a Ninja Scroll.
Oh, God. That's not a kid's thing at all. Oh, my God.
Because it featured this woman in very gigantic ponytails or something like that. I don't remember exactly now. But it was Ninja Scroll, and she said, I brought you a Mickey Mouse to see.
Mickey Mouse.
And I remember that it has this attempted, trigger warning, an attempted rape scene in it. And I had never seen anyone being sexual on on TV, basically, because I was I must have been something like 9, 8 years old, something like that. So much less aggressively, violently. Sexual.
Sexual abuse.
Put it that way. Yeah. And I was I remember, I don't remember anything else about this movie. Nothing else. I just remember the title and that scene that is burned into my mind like a Kodak moment. And this guy breaks up the whole thing before anything finite happens. And he says this one line that stayed with me, she was like a plant, she had powers of a plant, and she had all these tentacles coming out that were not being very efficient anyway. And he said, find the plant, and he was meaning the woman. Find the plant some clothes. So that everyone else can preserve their dignity like she has. And that was very impactful for me because he was being extremely respectful to her in a backhanded way and all that. And I consider that, okay, I learned, what did I learn? I learned that there are, sexual innuendos, there is sexual abuse, and that the aggressor is the one that should be ashamed. And I learned that all of that in that one scene. That was not kids. Anyway, so.
Yeah, Oh my goodness. Ninja Scrolls was another like massive kind of hit because that was back then in the 90s. That's when it came out. It was a cyberpunk was massive in anime. That was a huge thing. And Ninja Scrolls was like, oh my god, now you got historical fantasy. And that was a totally different thing. You know, like to combat the whole Bubblegum Crisis, Ghost in the Shell, Akira, all that kind of stuff. And you've got the Ninja Scrolls. And the level of violence in that, like I was shocked when I saw it. And you know, I wasn't a kid, but I was still shocked about, the sexual scene and just the rest of the violence as well. Like, people were having their arms ripped off. Commonly in that anime. There was this horrible guy who was like he had a beehive inside his body, where he sent these bees out of his body to get people. Oh my god, it was disgusting.
Wow, I don't remember any of that.
Oh.
Yeah. So I see. You are right. It was in the early 90s. So that means I was not 8 or 9. I was somewhere around like 12, and I still goes to show I remember like a kid. Anyway. But yeah, it was still not for me, not intended for me in a way. So
not even me. It was too much for me. Honestly,
I've never seen it. Yeah.
It's really well done. It's so well done. But I think they did a series as well. Like afterwards.
Google with the last just a moment. So,
very impressive series. I mean, the whole theme of that particular story was, you know, like there's internal battles about different ninja clans and all this kind of stuff, and like misdirection.
Yeah, they had the series. They made the series in 2003.
Mixed direction and different plots and stuff like that, and most historically themed animes all follow that kind of a storyline. Doesn't matter if they're about samurai or ninja or, you know, just kingdoms or anything. They all follow that kind of political kind of machinations and misdirections and things like that. Even Blue Eye Samurai follows that to some degree. They always do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Oh no! Okay, I'll mention some anime that's out now because we're talking about historical kind of stuff. So let's see, Farian, Beyond Journey's End. We've talked about that in a Quackcast, I think. I don't know. I might have brought it up sometime because that was about.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was featured on Netflix, but it's also on, say, something like Crunchyroll or whatever. It's a popular anime, but that's about like a this elf woman who is a magician and joins she's already 1,000 years old. She joins a party of adventurers. They defeat the Demon King, which has been, you know, tormenting the land since before she was born, and this is like of her legacy of after that, and you know, her life, it goes on beyond the end of the story, beyond the end of the Demon King, beyond the end of all the rest of the people in her party, and going on and what she wants out of life, which is really cool. So that's what I'm referring to before about the idea of the massive diversity in anime, in that you can tackle that kind of an interesting story that doesn't follow the normal story structure. It doesn't follow the normal like genre typical story that everyone else does, or it approaches the genre from a different angle. So I like that. So that's an anime that's popular now. Spy, what's that one? Spy X Family, I think it's called.
It's super popular. I've been meaning to watch that one too.
Yeah, which is such a fun anime, and that's really there's some violence in that. Like, but it's like Tant says, it's sort of scaled back. You're not going to see the levels of gore. They're going to have violence in there, but it's very kind of family friendly. and it's a lovely anime because it's about this little tiny girl and, you know, this fake family that she's part of with this master spy and this master assassin, and he doesn't know that she's a master assassin, and she doesn't know that he's a master spy. The little girl knows, but she's dumb as a pile of bricks, but she's psychic, and it's really cool. And they're all together in this fake family together, you know, just as a way of having a family and being together, but also giving each other like an alibi for safety as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this fascinating like a tale about their family and all the spy things they do, set in a kind of a weird Cold War fantasy of 1960s Europe, I think it is, or 1970s Europe. It's weird. It's not like strictly set in a time, but it's like in the theme of a time of 1960s, 1970s, like Czechoslovakia or something like that. That's what it seems like. Like it seems like Czechoslovakia or Yugoslavia or something like that. But it's so fun. So that's another recent anime. Dan to Dan, that's a really cool one about psychics and ghosts and aliens and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's fun and like cheeky. It's gorgeous. So I had to mention some newer ones.
Yeah.
What are some eternal faves of you guys? Well, I think I mentioned in the Quackcast video, the Patreon video, Miyazaki, of course, and my favorite being Spirited Away, which I absolutely love, love, love. I've got that on DVD at home. It's one of my favorites because it's very relatable. It's like this little kid Chihiro, and she goes with her family and she ends up crossing over into the world of the spirits and then just getting stuck there and all the machinations of the spirits and learning about their kind of way of life, which is a kind of like late era, I don't know what you'd call it, period of the Japanese Empire, you know, just before kind of modernization, but like that's in this spirit world.
Meiji style.
Meiji period. Yeah, that's a good description, Tance. Yeah, so she ends up working at a bathhouse and doing the scrubbing and all kind of manual work with ghosts and sort of trying to find a way out of this place as she trying to get her memory back because she's stuck in there. She can't remember who she is, and it's just a gorgeous, beautiful, beautiful story, beautifully drawn and stuff like that. What about you guys? What's your kind of like ultimate classic?
Ultimate classic. I would have to go. Oh, did you ask Baines first?
Oh, Baines, yes.
Yeah, like I said, I don't have one that 100% clicks with me yet. Although, like I said on Patreon, I love the style of art overall. Although now I recognize there's good stuff and there's bad stuff, and there have been differences historically. I like Zom 100. It's a fairly new one. I like it quite a bit. I don't know if I love it because I watched part of the first season and I haven't looked at it in months. I liked Yusure Yatsura. I think that's how you say it. That's like a classic from the early 80s, I think, about sort of a triangle between a guy and an alien girl, and then the human girl that he likes. The alien girl likes him. And that one reminds me that another thing anime did for me was I think the first time where the heroes were jerks, like real jerks. Lupin and Yusura Yatsura. I'm like, that was kind of shocking and eye-opening. Like, these people are selfish, and it's not just like the one selfish cast member like we talked about a couple weeks ago. It's like the main characters. They're like jerks. They're self-interested and self-absorbed, and it's not like they get better at the end. They're still jerks, you know.
They are, yeah. There's no arc. They're always dicks.
Yeah. So that's I'm looking around. I'm looking at it. I'm looking for stuff that really clicks with me at that time. How about you, Tans?
For me, the classic go-to, like the one I will always have in my heart, is a movie. It is Heart of Sword, and it is basically it is a Kenshin story in a sense, but has nothing to do with the Rurouni Kenshin. It is a gorgeous movie, gorgeously animated. It is about this samurai guy who is sort of a drifter and loner and stuff, and he has tied up his sword. He doesn't draw it in any way. For some reason we do not get to know. And he gets stuck with this kid that is overly demanding and kind of rude, but also very, very vulnerable, a very vulnerable kid that is being chased by these weird Chinese guys that are basically the bad guys. And they are looking to catch the kid and turn him into an ingredient for a potion of everlasting life. So, and in a very sinister shaman/satanic style ritual that they want to have him in, and so the samurai is stuck in this situation that is sort of lands on him, basically, this situation. And he has to sort of make his own choices about how to protect the kid, whether to protect the kid, what to do about the others, whether to ever draw his sword, because he really does not want to draw his sword and kill another person ever again. That's why I said that it feels very much like the general gist, the concept for Kenshin, but has like the style is completely different, the character is completely different, and it is a story of trust and betrayal, basically. Who trusts whom, who betrays whom. The betrayals are all extremely bitter, and the leaps of faith are also very heartening and stuff. And the crowning moment of awesome of this movie is that at the end, the finale is this huge, gorgeously animated sword fight between the samurai and the almost monster level competent Chinese sword guy. So with whom our hero has some kind of connection, because they are both basically outcasts from their societies, but tolerated because of their skills, if that makes sense. So there's a lot of nuance in it, and there's a lot of beauty to be seen in it. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, highly recommended. It is gorgeous. For me, it is on par with all the Miyazaki films and all that. So.
And that's called Heart of Sword, you said?
Heart of Sword, yeah.
Heart of Sword.
Okay. And I think that they said, like the creators said, that they did a different take in the legend of Kenshin, basically. That it would be more realistic, more down to earth, and more serious, without it being like the guys that try to make the kid into an ingredient do it for real, because they are weirdo nut jobs. So it's not that it will work, it is just that they want to do it. So yeah.
Yes, I have to. My very bad, naughty cat. Whew. All right. Okay. A special mention goes to the show. Love it. One of the best, most glorious cyberpunk animes. Akira, of course, just worth the rewatch. So many great hand animated scenes, just super frickin' glorious. I should mention also shonen anime. This is a particular style of anime that's always very popular, but they generate huge, frickin' just titanically long series, like thousands of episodes, like mind-boggling. Of course, the famous One Piece. There you go. Yeah. Like, and it just repeats. See, the style of thing in a shonen anime is that you have some kind of guy who has fighting powers for some reason. So he has the power to be a good fighter, and then he has to get stronger to go up against some enemy, and he gets stronger and he goes up against that enemy, and that enemy is defeated. He gets friends or whatever, and they all, join him, and they also battle enemies, and then they have to get stronger and go up against the next thing, ad infinitum. Dragon Ball Z or Dragon Ball, so you can get into it because they can be fun initially, but it gets freaking boring after a while because it's the same thing repeated over and over and over and over into infinity. It's freaking ridiculous, but that works. That's super popular for Japanese animation. So many people love One Piece. So I don't know. I suppose you follow the characters. Familiarity kind of breeds a kind of like affection. And you follow them, and you don't mind that they change. You kind of like invested in the fact that people are getting stronger, and they go, "Oh yeah, he's my favorite character. This character's getting better, and I want to see what he does from there, and all that kind of stuff." But yeah, I managed to like get a few hundred episodes into One Piece before I just gave up totally.
Wow. I think I watched 2 episodes. As far as I've gotten so far. I don't know what it is for me. There's something not cultural thing or something that's not quite locking in with me. But I love the look of it so much. I keep trying.
Well, this Quackcast is going to end, so we better say goodbye. Goodbye to everyone for number Quackcast 735.
Bye.
You can't see, but my 2 strands of hair are flowing, and the highlights in my eyes.
Oh, you don't have a little vein kind of hash mark kind of thing throbbing over your head, or a sweat drop floating above you.
When we're really close to the end, now the sweat drop is about to come. We're about to end.
Now it's the sweat drop, yeah.
A nervous laugh.
Oh God. All right.
Now
goodbye,
we are going to turn into chibis, as we all gesticulate.